now. And good afternoon, good morning, good day, wherever you are in this big world. And I'm Rick Zanatti, and next to me, right over there, to my other side. Well, anyway, right next to me is Kirsten Rourke with Rourke Training. How are you, Kirsten?
Good, how are you?
I am doing well. Hey, we're in for a fun show today.
Yeah, this will be great.
We have with us today Maxwell Hoffmann. He is the Technical Communications Suite e-learning evangelist for Adobe. And he's a fascinating guy. Now, you're going to have to slow him down because he talks fast. But you're going to have a fun time with him. He's got great perspectives on imagery, art, and all sorts of stuff. I think we'll have fun. Without any further ado, let's introduce Maxwell. Hey, Maxwell, how are you today?
Hi, fine. Thank you very much.
Good. So anyway, so you're now the technical. How long have you been with Adobe?
Well, I've officially been on board as an employee since January this year, so I guess I'm hitting 9 months.
Great.
Ironically, I've been a partner of Adobe's off and on as a guest speaker for about 10 years. And just a quick humorous anecdote, I was recently at 2 back-to-back shows, and people were surprised I was working at Adobe. They were so used to seeing me frequently appear at the booth as some thought leader from the translation industry. So here I am. Well, I'm back working full-time for Adobe and very much enjoying it and learning a great deal.
That sounds great. So Maxwell, today you're going to talk about imagery, images, impact, and things like that. Kirsten, did you want to kick off with anything, or?
Well, the people in the chat room say hello, and they know you as a FrameMaker specialist.
Oh, yeah, well, great. I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear they know me at all.
Yep. So some of them are using FrameMaker for their courses right now and are happy to see you today.
Oh, great. That's super. And hello to whoever you are. I don't see your name. But whoever you are, I'm glad that you know me in any way at all. That's wonderful. Good news.
Well, we have Leva right now who's saying hi. So she's one of our regulars, and she's tremendous.
And she is in Belgium.
Yes.
Great. I was just in England. I did stop in Amsterdam for about an hour. So and I've been to Belgium once. Very beautiful. I need to go back. It's been far too long.
Oh, and Jeff follows you on Twitter. So we have our frequent flyers in the chat room.
That's great. Also, Kirsten, I should mention I'm actually located in beautiful Portland, Oregon, where we just had LavaCon. So anybody who is following hashtag LavaCon on Twitter, it was quite an event, and what was interesting was the kickoff day for LavaCon was also the Portland Marathon, which had about 7,000 people in the streets, and the Hilton Hotel was the focal point of the marathon. Amazingly enough, it was sold out, and we had full attendance. It was just great. Oh, super. I see. I'm getting a hello from one of my former coworkers who obviously was there too. So great. So it's very exciting to hear. And by the way, I do have a couple of FrameMaker moments I might share with you. So go ahead with what you'd like to
ask. Rick, do you want to start?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about. Now, you were going to talk about images, impact of images, and let's start you off. I know you don't need a lot of prompting. You can go. So.
Oh, absolutely, sure.
I know we had a very interesting pre-show about a week ago, and believe me, Maxwell can be fascinating. So I found what you were talking about really interesting, because what I like about what you do, Maxwell, is that you look at graphics from a lot of different perspectives, not only a cultural perspective, an artistic perspective, from a fine arts, from a graphics, from just many different forms. And I find that really interesting because it gives a very different perspective to the usefulness of graphics. and the impact they can have on everything we do. So with that, I'll let you run with this one, and we'll just kind of interrupt you here and there and get some questions in and maybe some clarifications.
Sure. Rick, I thought what I would, I gave some thoughts of what would be relevant to share, and as anybody who knows me knows, I can talk a lot, I can talk really fast, and I can fork off in a lot of different directions. I think my joke is that, I started in my career when pterodactyls were flying through the windows. It seems that long ago. However, I thought I would briefly share maybe a few just relevant points of my working biography that are going to support what I'll be sharing today as observations. And
okay.
my goal, of course, is for this to give you a little credibility. This has nothing to do with companies. It's more the things I did. I'll make a confession a lot of people don't know, so this may or may not help my credibility. But I'm not ashamed of it, so I'm going to come out about this. I had to work my way through college. At the time I was going to college, although I qualified for scholarships, just due to a lot of technical issues, I did not have any financial support, zero. So I had to earn every dollar it took for me to go to college. And I'll make this quick. I actually did it doing two different things. One was, in those days, it was actually easy to get a hairdressing license. It took a few months. So I actually worked as a hairdresser, coloring and doing hair to pay my way through college. And that was an interesting one. Why do I share that? What does that have to do with anything? Actually, a lot. Because it had to do with color, it had to do with presentation, and probably the most personal branding of all, which is to totally change what you look like. And I never planned to do this for a long time, but I have found myself frequently going back to some of the experiences I learned from that. I think, as every man and woman knows, barber or hairdresser or whatever, frequently when people work on your head with their hands, for some reason, information flows forth.
Yes.
So I could write a book on what I learned as a hairdresser. It's pretty interesting. But also beyond that, the next thing I did to earn my way through school, I know this will keep your audience interested, but it's relevant or not, was I also briefly worked about a year in a mortuary. I was not a licensed mortician. I just did the driving of the flower cars, just the gopher stuff. But that was an interesting experience, too, because I'm not going to go get heavy into depth. I know some people are uncomfortable with that. But again,
as long as you didn't have the same clients in the barbershop, I think you were doing well.
Well, two things. There were different cities. They were close enough that could have happened. We did have a Hells Angels funeral, which was quite interesting, and we could save that for later chat. But
I'll make a note of that right now. Hells Angels
again, I didn't think of it at the time. And also, all opinions expressed are personal. Maxwell Hoffmann, and I just want to make it really clear that Adobe did not vet or have anything to do with what I'm talking about. So although I work at Adobe, I'm really representing myself personally today. Just do that to get up with. What was interesting about the funeral experience? Well, again, it was really branding and presentation. And, most people don't go to over 50 funerals a year. That's not normal, but I did, working there. And it was really amazing, just the wide variety, just from religious, ethnic backgrounds, etc., how many different ways people would present a loved one's last public moment. It had never occurred to me there were that many ways to frame that scene. I had been to perhaps a handful of them, and so it was kind of interesting working with people in two different forms. Now, beyond that, as I was going to college, something that is very relevant was I actually have a degree in graphic arts, and I actually trained as a traditional graphic artist and font designer. And my very earliest jobs were actually for small advertising agencies. And then I made a transit into what essentially is what I do today, technical communications. Started working for a government office doing very traditional, heavy, fat books with lots of policies and procedures, the old-fashioned way before we had quite gotten into desktop publishing. So I made the transition through desktop publishing as typesetters were moving away, as small computers were coming out. Another webinar for the future, if you want one, was I happened to be in the room the day that John Warnock and Steve Jobs of Apple secretly announced PostScript to a small group of developers. So I was one of the first 50 people to know about that product before it hit the streets. And I had a heavy background, I had previously worked for Morgenthaler Linotype, knew a lot about fonts, and I basically knew that whole typesetting industry was going to virtually vanish. Why does that matter? Why do I bring this up? You ask yourself, ... give people a moment to pause. Well, if anybody anybody who remembers anything about when desktop publishing came out in the mid to late 1980s, I would probably pick somewhere between 1986 and 88 is when what we think of as old desktop publishing kind of matured and became affordable enough to really spread out. It was a tremendous tipping point. Number one, for years there had been people who were kind of gatekeepers in terms of, give me your information and I'll typeset it and make it pretty. That's what I was trained to do. So all of a sudden, the masses were capable of expressing themselves with fonts and to some degree, to a limited degree, graphics. That was kind of just starting. If you think of the early Macintosh and some like McDraw and some of those early programs. And I think we can all remember hostage letter typefaces, where people tried to use every font they could.
I was one of those.
Yeah.
So you mean the ransom note kind of approach to typography?
Yes, absolutely. Ransom note, hostage note. So a lot of people felt they had to use maybe silly things happened like drop initials being used in business letters, etc. So I saw some wild and crazy things. And I had enough of a formal background in what was good typography, which, by the way, is making a renaissance. It's kind of coming back. Ever since the documentary movie Helvetica came out, a lot of people are rediscovering typefaces and they're using them intelligently. But there's a point about this because today we're making a transition into tablets and mobile devices. And along with that, that's really feeding the hunger and the desire for graphics, rich graphics, images, any kind of interactive graphics that have more purpose and meaning.
I'm going to jump in for a quick second.
Sure.
Rick, we're having some feedback in the chat pod that the audio, Maxwell, your audio is coming. It's hard to understand. Can you move the microphone a little bit? We see if we can get less echo.
Yes, I can do that. And I can also lower the volume a little bit too. Let me try that. Excuse me. Is that a little bit better?
That's better, I think.
Okay, let me see. Let me just check in.
And I did lower the volume on your input over here because it was a little high in the beginning. I lowered that. That cleared it up a bit. And so let's see. That should do it.
So Maxwell, do me just a couple lines. Let's see what the chat pod says.
Sure. Okay, I'll read something. Creating a new language for nutrition. McDonald's universal icons.
Okay, I think that's better.
Yep.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'll keep an eye on everybody here.
So anyway, this long-winded biography is nearly over. So my credibility factor, leading through several jobs before I came up to Adobe, used to work at Frame Technology. Interesting experience, Silicon Valley company, pre-IPO. I was both a FrameMaker product manager and also a sales training director, which exposed me to a wide variety of audiences who reacted differently to information, whether it was print or whether it was illustrations. I think that we've become more homogenous to some degree as a global economy, but back in the early 1990s, I actually had to use different screen captures from FrameMaker to get the European audience to connect with the product than I used in America. And it wasn't just all cultural, it was just, there was a difference in what mattered to people. As my friend Jackie Gennari knows, because she seems to be watching, I just mentioned someone's name, I should have done that. Anyway, one of my former coworkers, Jackie, appears to be here because I got a Skype message. I spent about a dozen years in translation, worked for a translation company. And a lot of that, doesn't matter what I did, but most of it was basically fixing documents that had gone through translation, because a lot of things happen to both the text and to the graphics. I'll touch on a few of those things later. But if you want one guideline, whenever possible, create graphics that do not have text in them if you are going to go through translation, because somehow those layers of text will have to be extracted from the illustration and be translated and then however automatic put back in. So I'm going to be showing some examples of, a couple quick examples of ways to actually work with a graphic where there's really essentially nothing to translate in the graphic. So with that long background, I came on board as the evangelist for Technical Communication Suite / Technical Communication Solutions. The particular products involved, the primary ones, FrameMaker, RoboHelp, Acrobat, but also Captivate, and now Adobe Illustrator and also Presenter. So this is a package of products that come together in a suite. A really important point to make, I know that when it comes to products, obviously people hear a lot more about the Creative Suite. There are more people who use those products because they have kind of a broader application. You don't have to be doing something technical to use some of those beautiful tools. our products are somewhat focused in that it's primarily people doing high volume technical communications like airline manuals or policies and procedures, something that has a lot of text. And today, of course, we're reusing a lot of that text. Where this relates to graphics is people are now discovering there are ways to use graphics to reduce the content, basically to make the content collapse a little bit, because traditional documentation had a lot of screen captures in it. If you think back a few years ago, in your mind's eye, think of a book you might have bought 10 years ago, either about Microsoft Windows or wherever Microsoft Word was in those years. And we had these fat manuals that you thumbed through, and you saw lots and lots of screen captures. About every page had one or two screen captures of the progressive steps that you were taking. And that was kind of the old traditional way of creating documentation. So what's changed a great deal today is that we are also exposed to social media, and Facebook's had a profound effect, not just in terms of sharing vacation photos, but people are becoming accustomed to capturing information swiftly in a visual way. I sort of think of Facebook as a photo album Twitter. It's almost like a Twitter stream of pictures, and Google Plus is somewhat that way too. So a lot of people are kind of using their eyeball to sort of gravitate to images to determine if that's something that they're going to choose to read or not. Once they do open up something that perhaps is either a blog or something close to a traditional website, an intelligent use of graphics has a lot to do with reader retention and also making somebody want to continue on. So actually, Rick and Kirsten, at this point, could I attempt to share my screen? And
Sure.
Okay. I don't use Skype all the time, folks. So let's just see how technical I am. I believe I can do this.
And while you're doing that, an interesting point, I went off to Adobe today to go look for the Comm suite, and I had to do a search to find it. It's not on any of the menus easily, and that's so typical Adobe. They just kind of hide certain products, and I don't know why they do that.
Okay, now, okay, it says I need to be on a call to share a screen. I'm on a call, so let me go back to be on the call. Oh, here it is. I just went in the wrong window. Well, I think part of the reason for that, to try, naturally to try to defend my employer, is that share screens. Here it comes. I think it's going to happen. Good. Is that first of all, Adobe has 10,000 employees. God knows how many customers. I can't imagine. And due to that, there's just a huge product base. So the products are somewhat segregated, and a lot of FrameMaker and RoboHelp are very important, significant products, but they kind of have their own following, and they're sort of a section of the Adobe web area that people will go into. I mean, obviously, if you go into product and a FrameMaker will pop up. Okay, well, here we are. Now, can you see my screen okay?
It's a little,
Yes.
It's a little small. It's smaller. What we're seeing here is a little smaller than what's on Skype. For some odd reason, it transfers just a tad. So it's skewed over to the left a bit. So if you can move it, maybe move the window to the right, to your right a little bit, it'll probably even out.
Is that better?
A little bit more. Right about there, I think. Let's see. Well, we can see now. Now we can see the image.
Okay, terrific. Okay, I'm going to essentially kind of scroll through here. What I'm showing you right now is it's a white paper, and I'm not. First of all, I'm not sharing this because I wrote the white paper. This really is coincidental. This is a white paper I wrote about 5 years ago for a translation agency. I'm not trying to make a heavy endorsement for that particular company, but I could not find this information anywhere else. That's why I'm sharing it. I would have happily.
And by the way, if you're in the chat room or watching the recording, we will have this link for you later, so you could take a look and download it yourself and read it.
Yes, and so anyway, this was a particularly interesting project. I'm going to make it very brief, but I'm going to show you some of the visuals in it. And the particular company, you can see the logo up there. We wrote a white paper. It was a case study of an actual project in which McDonald's needed to go into 109 countries. Let me get up some visuals here where we can see some graphics. Okay, and so the white paper, you probably can't read the text, but it has this swirling image, and it says, "What do you think this is? Is it a lollipop? Is it a warning, or is it an avalanche?" So the next time you go to McDonald's, take a look at something that you do. Take a look at those icons that are on the bottom of the Big Mac burger box or any of the packaging, and they're the little icons that stand for fat, carbohydrates, etc. And actually, here's a good example. I hope you can see this well. In fact, I'm going to give me a moment here to make this a bit bigger. This actually shows the original icon that was considered for use, and then how the final icon that managed to pass all of the tests. So the point of this case study was there was an exhaustive amount of research that was done through 109 countries in which people who are visual, I think they were called visual localization specialists. There were people who were aware of cultural issues surrounding images. I'm sure that many people are aware, either from YouTube or on the web. We all know that you can't see me right now, I guess, the screen, but hand gestures are very significant. And so there are certain seemingly innocent hand gestures in Western countries that can be perceived as obscene or insulting in other countries. The same thing happens with images.
I know the fat one.
Yeah, yeah, that way.
The original one. Yes, I have friends in Germany.
Can you zoom in on that page a little bit more to make the icons a little bigger?
Absolutely. In fact, I could even go to 200%. And here, I think if I kind of scroll over, I think we can see almost all of them. Okay, so here's the early icon, the final icon. I have everything except solve. So actually, folks, the top row is what the ad agency for McDonald's thought of as their original images, and the bottom row basically what was eventually accepted. And when you think about it, some of them seem kind of logical after you think of it. So if we look at the final ones here, under protein, these are supposed to be kind of like building blocks. You know, proteins are like the building blocks or whatever. Oddly enough, for calories, they could not come up, and the white paper goes in depth into this, they could not come up with any single image that people would actually associate with calories. There's a number of them throughout the document. The carbohydrates have to do with sort of like a power meter. And salt, there were many reasons why they came up with this thing for salt. I think part of it was like the top of a salt bottle. Some of the other images, which I think I have in here, and I'll try to find a few, this also brings up, like, why do they have to do this? Well, the reason was, in some parts of Europe, you have to go into up to 22 languages. So on the package, if they had to put the actual name underneath the icon, there would be a list like this in teeny tiny type, which obviously is not very effective. The white paper is also interesting, and it goes in depth into issues printing on styrofoam, wax paper, cardboard. I learned a lot doing this. It's pretty amazing. I'm going to try to zoom down here just to see if I can find one more interesting image, and then I will show you something about a way to make images dynamic and some of the new ways that we're doing now. Here we go. So here's a good example. These were some examples of, as I recall, I think this is for and the first one, I hope you can read it. The first icon on the left, which is those are supposed to be like two little seeds or leaves. Well, interestingly enough, this is one of the few icons that the entire world universally interpreted the same way, and everybody thought of aliens, you know, that are like close encounters of the third kind. When they went to remote villages in the Andes, when they were dealing with native people who didn't have a lot of exposure to films, they would look at that and say, people from other planets. You know, somehow this is embedded in some interesting ideas. But no matter where you went, everybody associated that with an alien. The second one, somehow this was fiber. Many people thought it was like a bird sanctuary, a slippery or curvy road. My favorite was this third one. There were a number of countries that associated this with marijuana, just because they had three leaves. One of the higher risk icons was that a lot of people thought this was like a Christmas tree with a candle on top. And not that that was a bad thing, but people would wonder, like, why am I eating a Christmas tree? So this is just a little bit about, just a little peek at this document that I think everybody will find quite interesting. What I'd like to do to kind of translate over there is to actually give you just this is not going to be a product demo, I promise. But tell me if this is over in the middle where you can kind of see it, hopefully. Maybe. Can you see my FrameMaker window that's got a little...
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. What I'm going to do, as you can see, it says Zanetti up there. I'm going to just briefly recreate how this got created. And I don't want to make this a product demo and go in depth into... before I forget, though. There is something I can show you. We will share this later, but if anybody wants to pause and write it down, this is the bit.ly link that will take you to the place that you can get that white paper from that I showed you a moment ago. So all you have to do is just write, capital T, lower x, D, WAD. That will get you there. Here we go. So what we're looking at is a FrameMaker document. For those of you not familiar with FrameMaker, a real crude way to describe it would be Microsoft Word on steroids. ... also with virtually idiot-proof data and XML capabilities. So you can create structured documents, or you can create sort of a Microsoft Word document that is well-formed, does intelligent things. This particular graphic that was imported, it's a very simple graphic import, has been named, it's been given a name. And also, if I move up here to the side, I'm going to turn on something called text symbols. This is kind of like when we turn on the little paragraph symbol in Microsoft Word so you can see hidden things. And just notice that there's some markers in here, like like if I go into animation, for instance, there actually is a marker there. And you don't need to read this, but it's basically saying that it's linked to a particular view of an animation. So what I want to show you is how you can do something really powerful, and that's right up here. I've decided that I would like to swiftly create a table, and I want this table to include all of the parts that are in that 3D diagram, and I'd like every one of those parts to be hyperlinked to the part in the table. So this is kind of a partial demo, and the way we do this is very simple. We just go to the graphics menu. This is probably down cut off where you can't see it, but there's a message that says create link to table. It says create table link to graphic. So we've got our graphic identified, and we have 3 different types of things that we can link to. Different views of the graphic, like your front, back, etc. Different animations. We already have some links to that below the graphic, and I'm going to do one for parts. So basically, if I identify a particular style for my table, this is it. Insert, lapo, I'm done. So it actually created that list of parts. You can see that each part has this sort of little symbol at the end. That's the hyperlink that's going to, in a moment, go over to that graphic and make it do something interesting. Now, it would actually take me like about 10 seconds to save this as PDF. And for sake of time, I've already done that because I know that we have a lot to cover. So this is basically what it looks like in PDF. And the first thing we'll see is that you could actually change your view. Some of my little markers, and now this is how interactive a PDF file can be. So you can actually choose selected views you should look at. You can also turn on an animation. And this is in PDF, and this can actually work online in tablets under certain circumstances. What it'll also do that's interesting, let me go to the front where you can see this, is that I can actually choose different plates or et cetera, different parts of the, here we go. So let's go to the back view, turn that around. So here we can see gear up, gear down. As I choose these, there you go, there's one, and here's the cable adjustment, and the stroke, and I'll go to the derailleur unit, which I should show here. I'm picking things that are all on the other side of this. The other side of it, so you're not seeing anything terrible. There we go. Here, let's turn it around, and you'll see it happen. So there. So if you look closely at the top, you'll see that little area is grayed in, and I could actually still choose the animation. So how would people use this? Why does this matter? If somebody is doing any type of documentation or descriptive text about how to use equipment, might be medical equipment like a defibrillator or something to stop a heart attack. Quick note of why this would matter. If this little PDF file were available on some type of a panel, I recently found out that the hospitals in Los Angeles County have full-time staff working in the hospital. These are employees of the hospital, speak 130 languages as their first language, not their second language. So there are some variations of Vietnamese and Southeast Asian languages you've never heard of, fluently spoken in large communities in Los Angeles. And although most of these people have fairly fluent English skills, if they catch someone in a hallway dropping dead, you really don't want a pause of 45 seconds while they're thinking about the English. So this is one of the reasons that this can be quite exciting, because clicking on this and making all of these changes is going to allow this to change very quickly. The second and final thing that I'd like to show you about, I've talked a little bit about Comm Suite. This happened to be created in FrameMaker. Another new thing that's quite exciting to me, and actually to a lot of people, is the ability for both RoboHelp and FrameMaker in Comm Suite to actually output to what's called HTML5. Why does that matter? You ask yourself. The reason is it allows one single set of source files, and they could either be files in FrameMaker. It actually can be Microsoft Word files linked in RoboHelp, or it could be authored from scratch in RoboHelp. And you can actually have the HTML5 files be perceived in different ways by different devices. So what you're looking at right now is the desktop version. This is what it would look like in just a typical browser like Google or something. It's just got a particular look. Let's take a look at something else. This is what it would look like on I'm going to make my screen a little smaller. This is what it would look like on an Android tablet. So if I went to my table of contents, you can see that it's quite different because you're on a smaller screen. And one thing that's interesting too is that in traditional HTML, or in HTML5 on a laptop at least, you can actually have things like tooltips and pop-up windows. That works if you have a mouse where you can click on something, but we haven't yet reached the point with tablets where finger gestures and a finger floating over something will make all of the things happen that we used to. So some of the things like related topics might become a button, and then it might turn into like a hyperlink. So this would be a hyperlink that would allow me to send email to the admin. I don't want to do that, so I'm going to go back what it was. Here is iPad, and this actually really looks pretty if you actually go on the iPad right now. Now, this is, I should emphasize, this is a simulation in Firefox. You can do this also in Google. So this gives you a pretty good approximation of what it's going to look like before you physically look at it on the device. But here you can see that when you're on an iPad, you're going to have yet again a different experience.
Can you move that window a little bit over to your left? I mean, to your right, to center it.
And just for a quick review, here was the desktop version.
There we go.
Go back to the desktop. So get back to the original here. Here's the desktop version. This is what it looked like the first time. Sorry about that. This is the Android tablet version. And by the way, you can easily create both glossaries and indices. And what's kind of interesting about this is a lot of people are used to ebooks like a Nook, Kindle, some of the e-readers. We do publish to all of those formats. We publish to EPUB 2, EPUB 3, and we also publish to both Kindle formats. Now, many people who previously published books in EPUB or Kindle, you'll often find that there is no index. They haven't really found an easy way to do that yet. However, with FrameMaker or RoboHelp, that's not a problem. You know, we have a way of carrying that over. Let's take a look at one more. Here we are. This one, I think, is back to the desktop. And the final one, my favorite, and I could take my camera and zoom in and actually show it to you. This is actually on iPhone. So on the iPhone, you can see the contents are really reduced now. They're quite a bit shorter, as they should be. Now, this is an approximation, so I may go somewhere that my graphics don't look perfect. Once again, we have related topics, you know, as a spot that we can go to. You can hit your back button to go to particular places. There's links to external support, and we'll just go one more, and then I'll stop showing you things. The other thing that will also happen is the publishing choices within RoboHelp will allow you to do different things. So, for instance, if the cursor does hover over a keyword or phrase, if that device supports it, you can actually use DHTML, dynamic HTML, to make the text rotate or get big or do some interesting things. And you also have a tremendous amount of control over search. Although we're focusing on images today, that is important because you want to be able to help control where the user goes and that they don't ramble off into, you know, a bunch of blogs that mention your company name with a lot of diatribe. The dynamic graphics that I showed you earlier, there are equivalents to those, especially with video. MP4 is a particularly good video format that will work on virtually all of the tablet devices. So that table that I created a moment ago, and I'm actually going to stop sharing and just go back to talk, so hopefully you'll be able to see me.
Yep, there you are.
Good. I can't see me, but that's okay. I'll remember to stare at the camera. So basically, there's a number of video formats, including MP4, that will work on virtually all of the tablets or all the mobile devices. One final new thing that has a lot to do with graphics, I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with Captivate. Captivate, which is part of TechComm Suite, is one of those products that will do capture with movement. And among other things, we even have other products from Adobe that do something similar. But capturing your screen movement, like if you're doing a software simulation, one little video that's 90 seconds long could actually replace about 20 static screen captures. And what's exciting about it is Captivate has the ability to actually automatically insert little text balloons that name what you're doing, you know, kind of narrates it. So if you're not going to add audio or narration, it's actually saying choose file open, choose directory or whatever. All of the text layers in those Captivate movies can quickly be exported out, translated, and they can automatically be imported in place. So it completely eliminates what I used to work with, which is that totally manual process of going into Illustrator files or Photoshop files and finding the text layers, extracting the text out, doing a bunch of, translating it, and then somehow semi-automatically getting the text to go back in.
Yeah, Captivate does a pretty good export to PDF as well, where you have the fully functional Captivate right within a PDF document, which is pretty useful. I know a lot of our clients use that and like it.
Yeah, it is. And actually, one final thing. Now, seriously, this is not a product pitch. It may sound like it, but the only reason I'm mentioning it is these are all things that actually matter to people who do these type of projects. One of the new features available in TechComm Suite 4 is that RoboHelp created that pretty HTML that I was showing you. RoboHelp actually has the ability to well, I don't want to say it. RoboHelp now has the ability to actually import output from Captivate. So if you do what's called, you're getting into e-learning, of course. So if you're doing what you call step-by-step training, and Captivate can be set up where it pauses and it'll ask you to on a button and then move forward. Those modules can actually be imported into the RoboHelp project and will actually become part of your help output. So it's really opening up the world of delivery, because you can still, if you let's just say theoretically starting with Word or hopefully FrameMaker, and with FrameMaker you can create an extremely attractive paper-based PDF output. There is still demand for that. It hasn't gone away much as people might think. So they're particularly with medical, manufacturing, pharmaceutical, these large companies. Many of them want some documentation that resembles paper. Their overseas clients are demanding that. So you can have that whole experience of the moving instrument that I showed you earlier. Then that exact same file with conditions, you can have conditional text, or if you're using an XML as your basis, and we can actually save a .xml file or a data file, you can actually have attributes. And the attributes can actually make portions of your text disappear or display before you publish. So this allows you to actually create different versions of your document, even with different graphics, different types of graphics for the devices that you're going to, or to the audience that you're going to try to capture, with this information. So if I were to summarize this, I know I've been talking a long time. If I were to summarize this whole message, I think I would try to distill it down to this. We're kind of almost beyond one of those tipping points like we were when desktop publishing came out, and maybe the next thing was e-commerce. When e-commerce really matured, there were a lot of people who drug their heels about creating an effective website. And I think we can all remember when there were what I call token websites. There was a website that gave you a little history of the company and a recipe for making a pie with Coca-Cola or something kind of trivial. And of course, that quickly exploded into the Amazon type model for e-commerce. We're finding something similar happening now with tablets and mobile devices. And one of the biggest things with mobile devices is, I'll get political for a second. If we think of the whole Arab Spring last year, where there was a tremendous upheaval and many countries changed their governments, a lot of that was driven by people with cell phones or smartphones sharing photographs with each other and also with the outside world. And that was something that really wasn't possible 5 years ago. So there was a tremendous amount of power and control in images, because people were saying, hey, this neighborhood just fell, maybe we can do the same thing. I'm not saying I'm for or against that. I'm just saying that's what a different world we live in today. Well, we're kind of experiencing the same thing as the corporations, in that our clients will come back to us with their feedback very quickly if they don't like something. One recent example, this is not political either, but as we all know, the recent iPhone came out with their own version of Apple Maps. And everybody knows about some of the funny things, like the Brooklyn Bridge was underwater, and my favorite was the road over the Hoover Dam made a U going down into the river. Well, any company, not being critical of Apple, but I have to say to their credit, they came out with, I apologize, they said, okay, it's really not that great, we admit it, etc. The important thing there, though, is how quickly consumers responded, how quickly Apple realized that something they released was not quite what people wanted, and how swiftly they responded to that social media, which is the positive thing.
That's so true. Now I'm waiting for Apple to finally change on the new iOS 6 the horrific white dialer with light gray buttons, which you can't read when you're outside.
Oh yeah, there's that. Well, there's a number of things. If I were to, by the way, I hope somebody from Apple's listening. But if I were, I have the old iPhone. I have the iPhone 4S. My favorite new feature of the upgrade is that there's always been a spell checker so that it would put a correct text as you go along. Well, I've now discovered that it will sometimes correct words that have scrolled off the screen. So my iPhone signature says parentheses, dictated with Siri parentheses or something, just so people know why there's some really word floating there. We'll get to this, I'm sure. And I will say this too, Adobe has had some experiences, but we've had a few times where I would say a product was misunderstood. I don't think anything really terrible happened, but we've had some times that a message just didn't come across the way that we wanted to. And because we actually sell some very powerful things like that, there's a product called Adobe Social that kind of goes beyond Google Analytics and letting you know exactly not only who's looking at your page, but what supplier they're there, how often do they come back, etc. Our company is very, very proactive in tracking our consumers in forums, blogs, etc. And I do have one important point, and I hope that this becomes a beacon or a guidepost for everybody. I had an interesting experience with Comm Suite and FrameMaker, and here's what it is. I became an employee in late January, and this product was released July 24th. I started working with this product August 11th of last year because I work for a very good translation company, Globalization Partners International, who is they're very proactive in doing things with Adobe products. And I was contacted to be one of the outsiders to secretly test the product. Well, what the significant thing about those dates is that we had non-employees testing the product almost 12 months before it was released. So this product was actually rolled out to us non-employees in modules, and the user interface wasn't quite finished. There was still a chance for them to change the code and change the gestures and change what we did. And there were a number of, the menus were completely reordered from what the engineers thought should be done. The first time I ever had this experience, every time somebody tests software, it's like, well, we have made this new product, now tell us what you think of it. And so we were kind of like co-developers with Adobe. And so it was interesting to come on board while the beta test was still going on, and we were about halfway through it and then go through that process up to the release of it. Because I started out as one of the non-disclosure people testing it, and then I became one of the insider people who knew all about it and got to be the guy who helped promote it when it came out. So that was kind of a Cinderella experience, I guess.
That's great. Now, we have less than about 5 minutes left. Kirsten, any comments in the chat room before we wrap up today?
No, not really. Not really.
Okay, they're all pondering.
Yes.
Okay.
Pondering. Well, you know, this is great, and I think we need to have you back on for more, because I know we're only touching upon what you know, and I really want to hear more of your other perspectives on imagery and everything else. Like I said, we're just touching the surface right now, so we're definitely going to have you on again and get deeper into all of this, because you're a definitely fascinating person.
If I could make one closing observation.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I'm just thinking out loud here. I think I see some of my translation friends here. I have an idea that might be an interesting theme for you that I'd be happy to share. I've been out of the translation industry now for almost 10 months, and naturally it pops up. You know, many of the people who come to me are translating, but the vast majority of Americans really think they work only in English. They're not even aware that their company translates their information.
Right.
And here's the aha moment for me. In a way, I kind of thought, okay, I'm drifting to something new. I'm not going to work with all this translation stuff. Ironically, all of the things that I've been pounding into people's heads for the last 10 years are these are the best practices to optimize your content that will translate really well. Guess what? They happen to be the best practices to optimize your content for a smaller screen for mobile devices. So if you are actually going to, if you know, let's say you really are in English only, you're one of the few people who just don't have to go to another language, you don't have anything to sell to the large Hispanic community, and you're just English only, everything that you would do to your content to make it translate well is the best thing that you could do to make it work well for an English-speaking only audience on an iPhone or on an Android. So ironically, that's come around full circle, where the translation localization processes are no longer esoteric and kind of off in a corner somewhere for people who are going to global markets. It's actually become very important to a domestic market. And I've just discovered that within the last 9 months. I'll be speaking about that later this month at Localization World. But there's an idea, but I'll talk about anything.
Yeah,
that's great.
That is actually really good. And it's interesting because it is the kind of stuff most people aren't aware of. And a lot of the tools, especially with Adobe, do have localization abilities. So that's good. Kirsten, did you want to say something?
No. I'm just, sorry, just stretching.
Okay. All right. Well, Maxwell, a pleasure having you on today. We really appreciate you taking time out to join us. And we will have that link up on the show notes. And we'll definitely see you next time, and we'll get into another subject. I think it'll be fun. And Kirsten, till next week.
Yes, definitely.
And we'll see you next week. And for all of you guys.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Maxwell.
Yeah, and thank you in the chat room. And if you're watching the show as a recording, please subscribe. We'll see you soon. Have a good one, everyone. Take care.
Everybody, thank you so much, and I appreciate being here.